Every day, a storm of paperwork keeps the global economy running. A car company that orders parts from suppliers globally. A retailer that imports large shipments of smartphones. Behind each of these transactions are multiple documents. Invoices, purchase orders, bills of lading, packing lists. Millions of specialists in accounting, customer service, and supply chain spend hours every day dealing with paperwork. But the process is manual, complex, and error-prone, costing businesses like yours in countless ways. What if you could eliminate all these challenges? With Rossum, you can automate all your paperwork and ensure consistent error-free processes. Rossum understands documents in more than 270 languages. It intelligently validates, transforms, and enriches document information in line with your standard operating procedures and master data. And takes actions like sending emails, requesting approvals, and rejecting documents just like a person would. Minimizing the paperwork that your team has to do while keeping them and you in the loop. Today, Rossum has processed $1.3 trillion worth of transactions, protecting companies from fraud and errors, helping them pay and ship on time, and digitalizing their processes. Rossum, changing how paperwork works.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to host you all today for a super interesting webinar where we're going to be diving into the theme of from implementation to impact and how Rossum and Barkers can supercharge Coupa and your investment within your procurement transformation. My name is David Jameson. I am very fortunate to be co-hosting this webinar with Matthew Hardacker from Barkers, who's a partner of Rossum and experts within the procurement and consultancy space. What we will be covering today is a few key topics around the best-in-class procurement organization, maximizing value with Barkers, Coupa, and Rossum. We're also going to touch on the impact of Agentic AI within invoice processing, and we'll have a section at the end as well for questions. But without further ado, I would love to introduce Matt, and I would love to introduce the Barkers organization. So, Matt, if you don't mind, give the audience a little bit about yourself personally first, your background and your journey to joining Barkers, and a little bit about what Barkers do as an organization, for those who don't know.
David. Thanks for the warm intro. Good to be presenting to you all today, folks. So I'm Matt Hardaker. I'm one of the Senior Delivery Directors at Barkers, and I head up our digital service line. Personally, I've been in procurement for, 20 plus years. I've been saying 20 plus for the 5 years, so I probably need to be a little bit more honest with how long I've been in this. But through that time, a mixture of industry, vendor side, consultancy engagements. And I think if I reflect on my career, I've touched and worked with 50 plus clients of varying degrees of industry. Barkers itself, which I joined 4.5 years ago, Barkers celebrated its 10th year in business this year. We started life as a procurement and supply chain consultancy, helping businesses improve their procurement outcomes, improve the teams, improve their ways of working, and anything to do with basically helping businesses achieve more with their procurement commercial work. And since then, we've grown as a business to a team of 50 across 3 distinct service lines. So first, there's myself in digital. We're proud to be a Coupa implementation partner, and the same for Rossum. But we also help businesses with analytical tools, change management programs, project management, and system integrations as well. I also have colleagues in IT procurement and procurement services. So starting with procurement services, procurement services is all about helping organizations augment their existing procurement teams with class-leading talent, or maybe even transforming their approach to procurement and supply chain management through procurement transformation programs. So my colleagues in procurement services are dyed-in-the-wool expert procurement practitioners. And then lastly, IT procurement. IT procurement is a similar side of the same coin to procurement services, but focuses on delivering large, often international IT procurement programs, whether that be the procurement and sourcing, the implementation from a commercial governance, or the assurance piece. And as an example of the scale of the work our colleagues in IT procurement do, we're currently leading Europe's largest IT procurement program in the defence sector. So a breadth of experience. And over Leaf, I'll share with you some of the clients and industries we work in. So next slide, please, David, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt.
So from an industry standpoint, it's probably just accurate to say, whilst we have a huge presence in utilities, infrastructure, regulated procurement, whether that be financial services or organizations under public or utilities procurement regulations, I think we're essentially industry agnostic. We've worked with organizations such as large defense contractors, organizations under public ownership, such as the NHS, all the way down to startup fashion houses. So lots of unique clients, lots of experience, lots of quirks and client and industry specific experience that we bring to bear for all of our new clients. So thanks, David.
No, of course, and obviously very happy to be co-hosting this webinar with you today, Matt. And I think you missed one thing in your introduction, which I really appreciate about Barker's, is you're just really nice people. I think this is, well, now we've been in a kind of a cooperation, or we've known each other for about a year already now. And I can honestly say from yourself and the rest of the Barker's team, not only is there a fantastic breadth of experience and let's say technical capabilities within the organization, I think there's a certain personal touch and way of working that you guys bring together. So I just want to say I really appreciate you taking the time today, and also the cooperation that we've had thus far. As I discussed at the top of the hour, there's a few key topics that we want to be touching on today. So the three sections we'll be covering is, what does building a best-in-class procurement organization really look like? Then we'll be touching on, how does Barker's, Coupa and Rossum play together? What makes us great, and what makes a very powerful partnership to really drive the maximum amount of value out of the procurement and finance organization, because we really see these two parts of the businesses coming together more often and using the same technology stack and capabilities. And then we will want to touch on a little bit of, let's say, the new developments within Agentic AI, because obviously, if we're going to be hosting a webinar about Rossum, we need to talk about AI at some point. So what I would actually love to do to start off, Matt, is to give a little bit of background and a little bit of context from what you've seen in the market. So the procurement organizations today, as we see, there's trade challenges, there's very complex geopolitical situations happening in the world. And this is obviously impacting global supply chains and trade networks. But what do you see, or what have you seen from your experience in, let's say, the last 6 to 12 months or so, is what are the three key challenges that procurement and finance organizations are facing today? And how does that prevent them from really reaching those transformation goals?
That's a good question. I mean, it's a challenge in itself to limit it to three, but we've only got this session. I think the first one that is on everyone's mind is talent, retaining talent, attracting talent, and satisfying those capability gaps. And I think procurement as a competency and a profession, it's at a bit of an inflection point. So the expectations placed on us as procurement professionals have absolutely expanded over the years. Procurement want us to be commercial stewards, ESG gatekeepers, if you like, and also people who are trying to embrace and empower organizations with digital change and digital tools, alongside the day job of running tenders, managing risk and controlling costs. And I think that requires a very different skill set to the traditional buyer or category manager, if we characterize that procurement person of 10 years ago. But the market, whether it be supply, talent, and everything in between, isn't moving fast enough. So one of the stats that shocked us was 72% of CPOs now are saying it's their biggest challenge And in fact, it's almost an existential challenge of their ability to do what the business needs them to do. So SIPS also commented on that. SIPS is our industry body, as you may know. They're highlighting this persistent global shortage of mid-senior procurement professionals, heads of category and alike, with that digital and analytical fluency is scarily a big problem. So Marcus, we're seeing this problem impacting projects every day. Clients, of course, want us to move quickly with tools like Coupa, like Rossum, but the internal teams are often ill-equipped to actually embrace and adopt that change. So that first one of talent and capabilities is a major problem.
Yeah.
Go on, David, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, from our personal experience as well, and I'm based out in Czech Republic, and it's one of the consistent things that we hear with global business service organizations and shared service centers, because on the positive side, we have almost a 1-2% unemployment rate in Czech Republic, which is fantastic. That means there's not an abundance of talent available. So it's always this counterbalancing between really shaping roles in the right way, I think, to the talent that you have, but also, as you said, as the expectations kind of expand with an individual procurement professional, people also need to be looking at what other things, as you mentioned, like ESG or looking more at the commercial side of the business, expanding their skills and capabilities as well. It's a very, very tricky challenge for organizations to face.
Yeah, it's massive, and I think without getting on my procurement soapbox as I tend to on these webinars, I think it does point to this consistent problem of the perception of procurement. I mean, I always joke internally that procurement is probably the only chartered profession, where it still needs to negotiate its own involvement in the day-to-day job. I've never seen someone say, do you know what, I'm going to have a go at management accounts today. But procurement still has to negotiate its way in. So we're still stuck with that legacy thinking that is pulling down a lot of procurement's team ability to actually make meaningful impact and move towards that being a strategic growth enabler and all the other strategic priorities that businesses has. But I think on balance, we have to accept, as McKinsey recently published, that organizations who elevate procurement to that proper cross-functional leadership function, that commercial function, outperform their peers by 100 to 200 basis points on EBITDA. So, the opportunity is there, and I think to break this mold, this perception, like Chris at Sunbelt Rentals did, who we'll talk about later, procurement has got to position itself. It's not the savings police or the business prevention police. I heard somebody say we've got to reshape with our stakeholders and our sponsors of what we want procurement to be.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's kind of one of those things where it's top down and bottom up kind of problem, right? Because I think as individuals, whether it's in finance that we deal with a lot more, we're stepping more into the procurement world, obviously with our relationship and the relationship with Coupa. It's the same kind of problems, right? It's like, well, we don't have an abundance of skills, but we also kind of changing what skills and expertise we may need as the profession or the organization is developing. So it's of course you can add technology, you can add people, but ultimately I think it also comes down to defining the right strategy, defining the right goals for the organization, and fundamentally designing or developing the right kind of metrics. So how do we actually measure that we're making the right impact within a business? And is that short-term impact? Is that long-term impact? What is the expected outcomes? And one of the things I was curious to ask you about is I'm sure many of our audience are procurement professionals or finance professionals, but what do you see from the market when we are designing these kind of new roles or these new competencies within the procurement function? What are some of the KPIs or leading metrics that are maybe not as obvious or maybe not what you would expect organizations to be tracking, but you've seen that are actually present in some of the leading procurement organizations? Curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, 1,000,000%, and it's a good point. talks around that doing more with less, which was the third challenge. So
Yes.
the most successful procurement teams we're seeing at the moment is where there is a direct correlation between the efforts and the priorities of the procurement team versus the profitability, the revenue, and almost the core purpose of the business. So where procurement and commercial activities are aligned, it becomes a much more holistic view of what we should be doing, because it's all about helping the business grow and achieve those revenue ambitions. I think secondly, payment and ESG performance. We've heard lots about ESG over the past 2 or 3 years. So businesses who are actually embracing SMEs and actually tracking the scope 3 emissions, they're the ones who are being successful and benefiting from that diversity in the supply chain. But that being said, Echo Vardis had commented that 63% of companies now consider ESG maturity to be within a supply selection process, but only a quarter measure the actual impact. So there's still a lot of work to do. And the third KPI is resilience. We've all seen the disruption to supply chains over the last couple of years. That clearly points to organizations who might not have been as resilient as they should have been. But it points to that make procurement an enabler of supply chain success, margin success, and achieving revenue growth.
Yeah, I think like it's such an interesting concept, because more and more often we're hearing changing this from an operational function into a profit center, or somewhere that can directly impact revenue and efficiency within the organization. And one of the most common conversations that we're having with organizations is optimizing that working capital. So making sure that money is coming in as quickly as possible, and also making sure that we have the robustness around our processes to avoid things like revenue leakages. We're minimizing our risks on certain suppliers in certain regions and so on. So it's very interesting to see all three of those things are heading towards the same goal, and hopefully having an overall positive impact. From your perspective, so obviously strategy is a really important element to define from the organization, and this will really depend on the maturity of the procurement function. When we look at the talent aspect, so because I fully agree that with the right talent you can move mountains for sure. As you've helped companies obviously operationalize or automate some of their procurement function, when you're looking at the talent base within the organization or what they need to bring from external, what are some of those key traits and characteristics of the organization? What have you observed in the market?
Yeah, and it's interesting, because the challenge of procurement having to negotiate its involvement actually fosters some skill sets that mean procurement people have this almost chameleon-like behavioral set, because we have to. So if I step back to the core question of, what are the traits that exhibit a world-class procurement team? Well, they're highly integrated, as I touched on before. So they understand the business they are in. They're data-driven. So it's, what gets measured gets done. And when you do it, you do the right thing. And they're commercially fluent. It's not just about savings. It's not just about running tenders. And those organizations, our data suggests they spend 20% less. They have much greater levels of stakeholder satisfaction, and they reinvest 30% more on strategic activity as a task than their peers. So the traits is that balance of strategy versus tactical fluidity, if you like. Plan, but they also execute with discipline. They're cross-functional in nature, having a great understanding of what the business does and what it needs from them. They're digitally agile. They're looking for best-of-breed tech stacks, and they're implementing it in a meaningful way. And that's how we help businesses at Barker's. And just to sort of finish where I started, that chameleon skill set is, in my view, the most valuable trait. Negotiate the contract in the morning, lead an ESG after lunch, brief the board by close of play. I think that breadth of experience and tasks and activities in a role is very, very rare, but it's what makes a world-class procurement team stand out.
Yeah, I'm laughing because it's very, I've been in the startup world now, or with Rossum for about 5 years, and it sounds very startup-y. It sounds like you kind of need to be able to move and adapt as to, what is the supplier you're working with, or who is the client you're working with? What are the internal stakeholders? What is important to them? How is the business overall changing? And then also, what is the role you want to be able to play in that change? And I think it's very reticent right now of the technology space that we're in, which is there's new things coming to market. There's a new understanding of technology. How do we best apply this and augment it with the strategy and the operational team that we have in place? And looking at the kind of second section that we'll be discussing today, we want to talk a little bit about how do we believe that Barker's is a professional procurement expert, marry this with best in breed source to pay or source to contract technology such as Coupa, and then also looking at the additional value that Rossum as an organization will as a technology can hopefully add to that capabilities. So really just starting off, I wanted to just talk a little bit about our history first between Rossum and Barker's, and then I would love to talk a little bit about your relationship with Coupa. How did it evolve? And then also, what does the future look like? But from our perspective, I believe we first met each other in Vienna last year at Coupa's Inspire event. And again, as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, I think one of the great things is you build that close personal relationship first, and a mutual understanding of, hey, one, things can get a little bit scrappy out on the field, so we need to be smart and tactical. But two, does bringing the best in breed AI capabilities with the best in class source to pay capabilities, and how do we wrap this around a delivery and a services model that makes sense for organizations? Because not everybody needs everything at once. It's about really setting that the right steps and the right processes in place. But I'm really curious to hear a little bit about your relationship with Coupa and how it's developed over the last several years.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are about to enter our 5th year in partnership with Coupa. Mm-hmm. We started to work or speak to Coupa, and we realized we had a shared vision, that there was a need to help procurement teams achieve more.
Yes.
Bolstering their capacity and their competency through process. But I think really it was, we wanted to help procurement teams transform with confidence. Mm-hmm. That was one of the themes of Coupa all that time ago as well. It was to be an enabler of procurement teams and that procurement strategy. So Coupa was already a market leader and continues to be a market leader in P2P, source to pay, and had built a reputation for enabling, really agile, scalable source to pay capability. And we combine that with our deep procurement operating model experience, transformation expertise. Yes. And I think really making the client realize that digital transformation is a challenge to be achieved, but it's not something that should be scared of with the right process and support. Yes. A partner like Barker's. So really counseling prospective customers, Coupa customers and Barker customers, that look, we've been on your side of the table and there's a lot of opportunity ahead of you, and we can show you how to achieve and grab those opportunities. So, over the last approaching 5 years of the partnership, we've delivered since in regulated industries, startup organizations, highly complex regulated industries in PCR, UCR, financial services, etc., often alongside a broader procurement transformation.
Yes.
And really helped organizations achieve value and meaningful change from, firstly, their technology investment, and secondly, their people transformation investment as well. And most recently, we've evolved our partnership with Coupa again. We'll be helping Coupa in acting as a reseller on certain categories and certain markets. So, the relationship with Coupa is incredibly strong. We have a wonderful relationship with the pre-sale and customer value solutions teams. Great ways of working, and they trust us to represent the values and capability of their platform.
Yes, no, absolutely. And again, without being too humble, you guys have definitely made a massive footprint in the UK and really growing into the European markets as well. There's one thing that you mentioned, which I'm definitely going to steal, which is transform with confidence. I love the tagline. I don't know if it's a Matt tagline or if it's
no. I give all the credibility, give all the credit to our marketing team. So yeah, that's on them, not me.
I absolutely love that. I've circled that in my notes. So I'm going to take it. But I think what we've experienced is very interesting. So we've kind of officially cooperated with Coupa for just over about 14 months now. And I think what is very interesting from our perspective is in that 14 months or so, we've won over 10 projects together with Coupa. But I think what was particularly interesting is we've seen both net new customers, so customers that were purchasing Coupa's P2P or source-to-pay solution for the first time, while bringing Rossum's document ingestion and AP automation technology at the same time. For some organizations, that may seem like a bit of a tricky thing to do, is bringing in two new technologies at the same time. In other cases, it was existing customers that were looking to really supercharge their AP automation capabilities and improve the amount of data that can go into Coupa. But what I'm interested in learning, though, is from your experience of implementing, and I'm sure things have gone great, and I'm sure things have been difficult during this larger transformation you've had with customers. What do you see as some of the pitfalls or challenges that procurement leaders or finance leaders should be aware of firstly, and then how they should avoid that? I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I present a rosy picture of how projects are, but in reality, there's a lot of hard yards. And I think I would say these are the things we counsel clients on to make sure they're successful. So firstly, no surprise. Silo thinking, process silos. We have come across many clients in the past who've gone, look, we want to embark on a P2P or S2P transformation, get best in class technology, but they forget this is going to change their internal process as well, and those silos remain. So there's a lot of hard work that goes in from the Barker's team to break down those silos and make people realize if you're going to change your systems and you want to transform, you've got to change your ways of working. And sometimes that's the attitudes of the people as well through that, change management and collaboration and discourse. So the second point as well is, tech first thinking. Digital transformation in whatever form, whether it's S2P, AP automation, any aspect of digital procurement transformation, it's got to be outcome led, not software led. So clients often underestimate the importance of their own operating models, their own change readiness, their own supplier enablement efforts. And 64% of failed S2P projects cited poor change management and misalignment of internal capability as the reason the program failed. I would add none of those were on our watch. But it's something clients really have to take seriously and make sure the right partner's in there to help them. And I think lastly, supplier enablement to colleagues in procurement. You can configure the perfect Coupa instance and the best in class technology, but if your suppliers are at worst disengaged, or at best you've not even engaged them or thought to do it, you don't achieve the outcome you want. So that's why we integrate our supplier enablement processes from day one. It's a core part of the project, but you've got to market this digital transformation as an opportunity for suppliers because it's going to create work for them. So the what's in it for them, both internally with colleagues as well as externally in the market, is vital, absolutely vital.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting perspective because you basically have to look at it from two sides, which is the internal, let's say the internal navigation and then the external navigation. On the internal side, even getting the right people in the room or even being aware of who the right people are is sometimes a challenge. The ERP team has one idea, the AP team has another idea, procurement function has another idea, leadership, et cetera, and it becomes even more complicated when you're in that regulatory industries. But I think one of the things that you mentioned that is that I've highlighted here is the tech first thinking. Again, while I do represent Rossum and we are a technology company, it doesn't solve all of your problems, right? Technology is not going to bring you absolutely everything that you need. However, what it does is it allows you to hit some clear goals. It enables the team that you have. And if you have, as we spoke about earlier, the right KPIs set up around automation, the right KPIs set up around about transaction time and profitability, and also what your expected outcomes are, technology is the only way to get there to some extent. You can't do it without. Right. So I think it's important that we don't silver bullet technology, but it is an absolutely critical part of that process.
Million percent. And do you know what, David? It's quite interesting when we go through procurement processes, particularly as an ex-procurement practitioner.
Yes.
We meet clients and we go through the usual, how does an implementation work? What's the roles? All the right questions you would expect to be asked. But I think what we found to be the most successful and engaging, such that the prospective client gets most from it, is,
yes,
look, Coupa has many, many great implementation partners. I think Barker's is the best one, but I would do right. But there are wonderful partners across all of Coupa's ecosystem. The real question that prospective customers need to ask to that tech first risk, if you like, is, look, let's not talk about how we implement the tech, because the tech can look after itself.
Yes.
It's how you manage that business transformation program. How are we going to move the business, move that dial from situation A to situation B? And there's a lot of heavy lifting and delivery muscle that you need to put behind these programs. And that's what the client really needs to value and focus on when it goes through its procurement processes.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have the exact same thing as well. And I think one of the questions that maybe not enough companies are maybe asking themselves is, great, now we've bought this technology, who needs to be involved to make sure that it is successful? And also, is it 20% of this person's time? Is it 40%? Is it 50%? Is it full time? And really understanding the level of effort it's needed from the organization, because without the business adoption and without the user adoption, you basically fall flat, right? And so it's, again, as you said, you can have the right design, the right technology, the right plan, but if you don't get the stakeholders involved throughout that process, it's incredibly difficult to enable this. What I would like to touch on is just on the some of the customer success stories. Some of the clients Barker's had worked with over the last few years. A couple of great names that I'm sure definitely people in the UK will be aware of, if not internationally. But I'd love for you to just touch a little bit on the story, not only here's the numbers and here's the metrics, but the people behind the story. I think this is an important thing to always highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 wonderful organizations in very different markets, all with a similar challenge of having to do more with less. So let's start with Vanquis Banking Group, an acquisitive organization, lots of businesses and subsidiaries being brought together, a focused procurement team under Steve School's leadership, and a second generation Coupa implementation. So their objective was, look, we need Coupa and our digital transformation to keep pace with business growth. But there was so much going on in this organization. It needed to be agile, flexible. So this purist delivery plan could not be achieved in a highly acquisitive entrepreneurial organization like Vanquis Banking Group. That was actually 6 deployments in one over 2.5 years. And we have a very, very happy and advocate in Vanquis Banking Group, Steve Schools. Nice. And of course, all of that was underneath heavy regulatory scrutiny. It's a regulated business, so every process designed really did matter. Sunbelt Rentals, we've recently done a webinar with Chris Goodall at Sunbelt Rentals. Chris is the head of procurement there. Our P2P and digital transformation was part of the Sunbelt 3.0 program, which was a whole of business transformation program about digitizing everything from spend, treasury, finance management, ERP, and customer outcomes. So I'd almost joke and say the business had decided to carry out open heart surgery for the benefit of the future. So as a Barker's team, we had to be part of a very, very complex organization, almost 5 or 6 businesses in one. And what was really apparent from, to me at least, the Sunbelt teams, this was an organization who absolutely knew their business and their market inside and out. So in spite of having very, very clear requirements, having a very clear direction and fantastic leadership, there was an absolute truckload of work to do. And there were many, many late nights over that 2-year program with Sunbelt Rentals, and we're thrilled with them.
It's projects like that really build the relationships for sure. It's all hands on deck, and there's mutual effort that's needed.
That's it. Well, I was talking to Chris at Coupa Inspire only last week, and we were reflecting on some of the things we'd forgotten about as to how hard it was. So you do forget these things. But lastly, guide dogs for the blind. Very different to the sort of hard-nosed commercial organizations with shareholders. Guide dogs, like many charities, have faced downturns in donations, increased operating costs. As you can imagine, the cost of investment in training a guide dog and providing the support wraparound for their clients is incredibly high. So that was an organization who absolutely had to do more with less. They had less people, but a need to do more so they could keep up the fantastic work with some of their clients. And apart from being just an absolutely wonderful group of people there, and we felt we were doing really meaningful work that have a fantastic impact. We got to meet the guide dogs too, which is always a benefit. So personally speaking, immensely proud of all of our clients and my team who do the heavy lifting. But those 3 are certainly standouts of recent times for very different reasons.
No, absolutely, and I think what I really like is just the breadth of organizations and the breadth of industries with very different goals, very different objectives, and I think especially when we are dealing with large or complex organizations, being agile enough to adapt somewhat to what they need, but then also being strong enough to say, hey, these are the practices and these are the things that we believe you should follow, and really working with the organizations to design and develop that. And it's one of the things I really appreciate about the Rossum team is, we're not a massive organization, so we treat every customer incredibly importantly, because every customer journey is individual, and even the individuals within those organizations have their own thoughts, their own opinions, their own challenges, their own problems. And I think really when you're leading a transformation project, you've got to be able to take in these considerations and thoughts as well. As we will kind of wrap up into the next section, I'd love to talk a little bit about Agentic AI, and I'd love to talk a little bit about invoice processing. Of course, what we have seen in the last 12, maybe slightly less than 12 months, maybe 10 months or so, is just really the topic around Agentic AI. It was LLMs. Second was Agentic AI. It's quite new terminology. From your perspective, Matt, do procurement leaders know what AI agents are? Are they talking about it? Are they speaking at the water cooler? Like, what's the general thoughts, and what have you observed from the market?
It's quite interesting actually, because there's almost the inevitable eye roll when people hear about AI, because it's just filling up your LinkedIn feed, every other feed for that matter. So people and our customers are absolutely talking about it, because they would do, right? It's everywhere. It's everywhere in the discourse, in your personal life and your work life. But I think at the moment it still feels very ethereal, almost a bit of noise. And Gartner recently commented that 3/4 of CPOs said AI is on the roadmap, but only 13% of them have actually got a plan or have achieved any degree of scalable ways of working with it. So I still think it's within the we're all talking about it but don't really know how to shape it. And I think the real impact of AI comes from those who are not necessarily shouting the loudest, but actually focusing on deploying it in a meaningful way and building it into workflows, and maybe having had done AI or practiced AI in their processes for a number of years without actually marketing it accordingly. So obviously, two great examples I'm going to talk about today. Rossum's AI-powered document processing, that is a great example of actual meaningful application of AI tools and agentic AI. And of course, Coupa has been working with AI and leveraging AI for years, not months. And I think some of the developments that Coupa are deploying are incredibly exciting and will make a meaningful difference to CPOs.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I agree with you at being slightly ethereal, and it's kind of in our space. We'll talk about it in just a few seconds. But I think one of the things that we try to do in Rossum is it's really an educational piece first, right? Because I've been in the industry now of 5 years, or just coming over for 5 years. I went from the hey, we have no idea what AI is, to, hey, it's kind of cool to train AI. Now it's like, why is AI not doing this? And it's like a very quick journey that people have gone through from really like first experiencing or using the technology to now having a very clear expectation of what it should be doing. But as you say, that's kind of counterintuitive to actually what's being delivered at scale. So there's a definite perception barrier between what's being delivered and what's actually being seen in the market. So the way that we like to think about it is it's a virtual colleague to delegate to, rather than a tool you simply use. The reason I mention this is because the reality is, if AI is doing its job incredibly well, you don't need to see it as much. It should be managing those processes. It should be managing those transactions. And us as business users or individuals should only really be touching the technology if there is a problem, or if there is an issue that the organization is trying to face. And when we talk about AI agents within the AP function, we try to break it down into the skill set. So if I have a colleague or an AI agent or an AI colleague, what are some of the key skills that they need to have to be able to perform the task that it is being delegated to? So when we talk about document automation or invoice processing, can we gather the context? Can we query the master data? And this is really where the Coupa piece comes in, is Coupa is housing a lot of that supplier information. It's housing a lot of that supplier data. And we want to be able to enable those documents coming in to the workflow, capturing the information that is there, but then also processing it downstream. Then I want to be able to replicate replicate those standard operating procedures and rules, as you said, especially in high regulation industries. What are the safeguards that I need to be able to put around the AI that follows that distinct process that we have outlined? And then finally, leaving the actions. So this is really where the automation kicks in. So not only have I captured the data and completed the task I have been asked to, but how do I then execute actions across the organization, whether this is back and forward emails with suppliers, whether it is routing documents that need approvals, or whether it's triggering actions into the P2P system or the ERP system to say, hey, I've checked my PO, I've checked my invoice, data is all good, now let's proceed to payment. Like, that is really what we call automation. If you need to touch it, it's not automated. It's a pretty simple principle from that perspective. And often what we see a lot in the market, and I'd love to also hear your opinion on this, but it is when organizations are quote unquote using AI, what does it mean? Are we taking something that is open source? Are we taking something that is specialized? Are we using something that is homegrown? How do we actually do this within the business function that we're completing? Every organization takes a slightly different approach. What we hope or what we do bring with at Rossum and with our customers is we have our P2P solution like Coupa. How can I really empower that by adding extensive capabilities with a best-in-class proprietary LLM to really automate that document transaction workflow into Coupa? Thus, if I can get better data into Coupa, I can get better insights, I can automate that business process. All of a sudden then, that effort and investment I've had into the core STP or the P2P landscape is somewhat more efficient. But I'm curious from your side, what are some of the kind of operational elements or the efficiency gains that your clients are asking you for? What are some of those key things that they say, Matt, I need to hit these numbers, I need to do this? I'm curious to see.
It's quite interesting, actually. Usually the first part of the conversation is, hey, we feel we should be doing something with AI, but don't know what we can do with AI. So it's almost everybody else has got it, why can't we? And now are we missing out? That almost FOMO, if you like.
Yeah.
The first conversation we typically have with clients is to boil down and really get rid of the myths around AI, that it's here to replace us, it will do our jobs for us, certain tasks will disappear from the organization. It's not about that. It's about systemizing the non-value add tasks and allowing people to either do more or do work that is of more higher strategic value. And that's where the conversation goes. So if we look at Sunbelt Rentals, which is one of the 3 customers who I talked about earlier on,
yeah,
they are a perfect example of a procurement team who've gone on that systems and AI journey.
Yes.
And repurposed and repositioned the procurement team off the back of that conversation, invested in class-leading technology, and then transformed the tasks procurement does. And it is now a growth enabler rather than a PO processor. They're all about focusing on value creation. And I think that's where procurement teams get the advocacy. That's the internal lens that's really important, because that's when procurement team, is aligning with what the business needs. Rarely do businesses say, hey, we want to do more tenders. They will say, we want to take control of our costs. And then you've got to unpick all the aspects, as you're discussing on that slide, David. What are the tasks and competencies that we need to do better ourselves, or just get rid of to let an AI agent deal with it? That's the quality conversation clients need.
Yeah, I really like that systemizing non-value tasks. I think that's a really, really good way of putting it, right? Because everybody's like, oh, we're automating jobs or we're automating tasks away. Like, it's partially correct.
Yeah.
It's, as you said, it's that systematizing that non-value, concurrent, consistent tasks that don't really drive much net benefit to the organization.
Yeah, exactly.
What I would love to kind of touch on in just a second is, of course, we want to provide a short technology walkthrough of Rossum's capability. But for those understanding, when we talk about P2P and an agentic AI workflow, we also want to look at what does the full work stream and the system look like. And of course, Coupa is a really key part of that P2P and STP solutioning. What we often very much see is bringing in agentic AI capabilities. You want to have multiple work streams into multiple systems. Unfortunately, not everybody has a nice, beautiful, centralized ERP system with all of our master data. So it does require a little bit of workaround and automation. But what I want to showcase and talk through to the listeners today is actually showing technology in action. So this is obviously not a live demo. This is a demonstration that was conducted by one of our lead AI architects. And what I want to talk through today is actually what a very simple workflow looks like. We will have roughly about 5 or 6 minutes left for questions at the end, because I see we have a couple. But what we are observing right now is the uploading and the sending of invoices and POs from the mailbox. So assuming that as a business, I have a centralized or a singular email that all of my clients or customers are are sending my invoices and documents, whether it's invoices, it's POs, it's e-invoices that are becoming even more prevalent today as the organizations are coming through, into one location where Rossum then is being used to pull that data into a centralized system. But not only pull that data, but sorting and organizing that data into the correct workflows. As you know, and you've probably experienced with your clients, Matt, you've got part of the team is in the UK, part of the team is maybe in Spain, part of the team may be in Poland, part of the team may be internationally. So having one centralized place for all team members to be able to access these documents allows us to streamline the back and forth communication with organizations, but also, and importantly, give visibility into the overall process. So I've heard many times that, hey, this invoice is being late, or it's delayed because somebody's not working today or somebody is on holiday. So as a business user, you need to be able to see the entire work stream of communication here. What has been the back and forth communication between you and your business vendors and suppliers? Then looking at the capability to be able to automate this flow. So you'll see in this document here, this particular document has been rejected, and it was flagged as to the reasons why it was rejected. Well, just in a second, we're actually going to see the exports. So, and what we mean about touchless automation within Rossum is truly touchless. It is received. You have your data schema defined on the left-hand side of this screen, where it pulls those data points that you as a business determines. The data that is important for you as an organization is completely within your control. Not only do we want to take the data from the document itself, but we also want to augment this with the master data that is housed either within Coupa or within the ERP system. Because certain elements that may not be privy on the document is actually the PO. So we can take the PO, the line item data, match this directly with the PO data that's housed within Coupa. And once you bring these components together, we have the right supplier with the right line items, with the right total amount, with the right due date sent, and it matches the correct purchase order. And then voila, system automates that process, and then what you can find is these documents housed directly within Coupa itself. So in our experience, where we want to help Coupa clients or prospective Coupa clients is to bring, as I said, that best-in-class overall procurement architecture, and then be able to augment that with an intelligent automation solution on the front end to deal with the pre-processing, the data capture, and the matching and validation of those data points before it goes into your downstream system. Because there's nothing that people hate more than going in and retyping data and information into a system that should have already captured that data and information. So what we will show now is just very quickly is how does this actually look in practice with Coupa. So we automatically or configure and set up the AP agents within Rossum. So it's following the AP procedures, looking at the matching logic, the data capture, and those calculations and transformations, and then embed that capabilities with a UI experience and integrate this directly into Coupa's landscape and architecture. And that's how we hope that we can bring a significant amount of value to customers. One great example of this is a client, Adyen, who's a leading payments processing organization within the financial services sector based out of the Netherlands, who have a massive diaspora of customers and are operating in over 20 countries. Initially, we were integrating in with Workday, and then about 2.5 years later, Adyen then decided to purchase Coupa. So we were already working with the business. They were then bringing in the source-to-pay solution to lay on top of Workday, and we were very simply able to transition and move that AP process from what they already have within Rossum, and then just add that data workflow into Coupa when they designed and built the Coupa workspace and so on. So I want to give some time as well now for Q&A. But before we do that, Matt, is there any last thoughts or last comments from your side of what you've seen around the agentic AI space?
I think I'll talk to one of the questions that's come in the chat, which
absolutely
linked to change management and your question. I think, look, agentic AI is an incredibly powerful tool, principally, that can, back to that, do more with less and focus on the strategic priorities of the business. But you've got to own your transformation journey and keep laboring the point of why you're doing it, what's in it for the business, what's in it for them as functional stakeholders, and what's in it for your supply chain. And I think that's doubly hard at the moment with the amount of noise in the market around AI. You've got to make it meaningful and tangible and really articulate what's going to change in the day-to-day job, because that's what people will care about when you are midway through delivery and it's all feeling a bit overwhelming. You've got to keep reminding people why you're doing it and what's going to change. So owning of that messaging and keeping yourself accountable to that messaging, and also keeping your sponsors accountable for what you need from them is absolutely vital.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really strong theme, or a strong methodology. Is as much as a technology vendor can support a client, as much as Barkers and consulting organizations can support a client, really owning that change journey as an internal stakeholder. This is absolutely imperative to making things happen. I know we've also got another question here from Jothy Hartley, which is, does Barkers prepare a client organization selection around Coupa or any other STP technology solutions before an implementation even starts? I think the question is how do you help how do you help organizations get to that selection process prior to working with Coupa or other source-to-pay technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. The short answer, Jothy, is we do. Our roots are in procurement and IT procurement. So some customers will come to us and say, look, we want Barkers to give us solution advice, procurement advice, lead us through the commercial process that will source and select and appoint such ever STP provider. But often in the larger programs, not only will we do the implementation, but we'll also be retained for post-digital transformation assurance. Often senior sponsors want the assurance that there is somebody stood over the business to make sure the forecasts and predictions and promises, if you like, in that originating business case are actually deployed in the business so that return can be made. So because we have such a depth of experience in procurement, supply chain and assurance, customers have the opportunity to bring Barkers in for, well, the entire source to assure life cycle, if you like.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great because everybody forgets that the work actually starts after go live. That's actually when you're operating. A lot of the work is preparation. So there's another question here, which is from a LinkedIn user that is unnamed, unfortunately, which is, data is key for efficient work within procurement. How can procurement teams ensure they are working from the best quality of data when using Rossum and Coupa? Well, first I can answer it for the Rossum component is two key things that are important for the data. One, which is master data. Like the master data is the absolute key thing. If you want to automate your processes, your ERP needs to be as clean as it possibly can. It's an ever ongoing problem that all organizations are facing. But if the master data is difficult, it's hard to automate processes. On the Rossum technology component, we always scan, validate, and check. And we have thresholds that can be predetermined and preset and also customized over time by customers to say, hey, I need data point X to be 99% confident before I automate. However, data point Y, slightly less important, not critical to the business, but it's important information to capture. Let's reduce that maybe to 80% so I can improve and impact my automation rates without impacting the data quality within the delivery. So it's a balance between automation and data quality delivery. if in or many organizations may just say, hey, automate me everything up to a certain point, but I still want someone to human validate and check this regardless of the AI is correct. At that stage, it's just really an organization's choice. Last final question, because I know we're on the minute, from Michael Jones here, which is cyber activities are attributable to hostile states threatening greater risks within supply chain resilience in Western economies. It's a longer question. And with or without technology, identifying and delivering risk mitigation, what agentic AI provides solutions? Interesting. This is maybe in Coupa's new technology, if I'm not mistaken. If you don't mind sharing 10 or 20 seconds on this, Matt.
Absolutely. That's a brilliant question, Michael. So I'll try my best to limit myself to 20 seconds, but ping us your details on LinkedIn, because I'd love to talk to you about this. The short answer is yes, but the better answer is, let's unpack that into its constituent parts of how we assess and monitor suppliers and the source and any risks associated with those suppliers. So the ability to systemically assess and monitor vendors from a compliance, new sentiment, financial risk, that sort of thing, that can be systemized and driven by AI, agentic AI models today. That is functionality that Coupa can do today. So really, it's about, what bit do you want to be human-led? Do you want the human to be the exception? Do you want the human to focus on the higher risk? What level of systemization do you want? But in terms of being able to take some of the volume and that almost handle turning of those tasks off the teams, absolutely. And when we look at the nature of Coupa's OpenAI API platform, the ability to bring in third-party feeds and even more data to enrich your master record and improve the quality of that vetting and checking, that is only getting better.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Matt. And for those of you who are still here, you can connect with Matt and I by scanning the QR code on screen. We managed to keep it just over time, but we're very close. Matt, thank you so much for joining us, and it was a wonderful conversation, and I hope it was valuable for the listeners as well.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, David.
Beautiful. Thanks, guys.
Take care all. Bye-bye.